Okay, I'm going to keep it really short because if I look at you, it's like, I think it's 80 to 90% are people who have been teaching in some capacity, so it's going to be really boring because I'm going to talk about how this project fits in the philosophy of our department. Hi, I'm Joost Rekveld. I'm the head of the ArtScience Interfaculty, and we're, well, as Chris was saying, we're part of the conservatory here in the academy. And I'm basically going to explain why this displaced project and also the hidden part of the displaced project, which is not part of today's art program, is how that is a fantastic fit in our curriculum. And basically what you have to know is that displaced for a number of students, a group of about 20 students of the Interfaculty, it's sort of the midpoint of a research project where they had master classes, introductions by most of the speakers you will hear today. And where they will have now a working period where they can work on their own prototypes based on these ideas, and also using part of the environment which is available in this place. So I'll talk a little bit about basically three sort of key points of the philosophy of the Interfaculty. Well, we're called Art Science, so one of the aims of our program is to, well, the main aim of our program is to develop sort of new multimodal or interdisciplinary forms of art, which are often inspired by new science and technology. And in the last year we have sort of increasingly done projects which are based on concepts taken out of modern science. This is a project we did last year, Cloud Chamber. Two Russian artists, Evelina Domnich and Dimitri Galfand, did a project with a number of students around the cloud chamber and particle physics and how you could translate that in an audiovisual installation. This is a student work by Matthijs Munnik, who graduated last year. It's a piece called Microscopic Opera, which is basically also an audiovisual installation based on sort of the hidden life of microscopic worms, which then become protagonists in a kind of opera, or at least that's his metaphor. And also last year we had a project on bioart. And this is another example of a research project we did called Grow Worlds, which was based basically on ideas from botany and city biology and thinking of how you can actually develop future scenarios for humans based on these concepts. Well, we're not a scientific department. Like the main aim of our program is to educate artists, so our aim is to have a sort of steady stream of great artists which we launch into the world. So we're also very happy that we have 4 very recent graduates in the program of Today's Art this year. So we're not a scientific department at all, and we approach these scientific and technological ideas really with the idea, the concept of hacking. Which has basically 2 sides. One is a sort of impolite side, like hacking. The term comes from the word, I think in sort of medieval English it was used to explain that with an axe you can also make furniture. So it has this sort of crude side, you just connect things and you see what happens. There's also a much more intimate and knowledgeable side about it, that hackers do know very often, very intimately what they are doing, but they have sort of side roads or oblique view to their technology. You're looking at images from a workshop we did like a year and a half ago. It was a very short workshop by Bart van der Put, based on his research into making edible solar cells from very simple materials like juices, all sort of edible materials. So that's the kind of approach we like to science and technology. So that's science and technology. Here you see a fellow student of some of you reaching out to an audience in Tirana. That's sort of the second focus of our department, is that if you think of new forms of art, it's also very important to think of new ways to relate to an audience. So there's many things which can be a medium, except which take place also outside of the art world. There's lots of ways to go about this, and one of the more practical ways we've done this in the department is to have a focus on projects on location. So these are images of a project last year in Tirana in Albania, where a group of students did interventions in public space. So it was his work, and this was also later in a sort of local startup gallery there in Tirana. And also our students tend to be DJs and VJs, so they were also sort of infecting the local climate there. So that's sort of the second part. And then the third part in my talk is actually the basis of all this, and that's also linked to our history, and I think that's also where the biggest link to this place project is that we do all this from an interdisciplinary base. I'm sort of sad that we're now in the 21st century and that the word interdisciplinary has not lost its meaning. In some circles it has, but in lots of circles there's still a very huge division between the worlds of visual arts, media arts, music, theater. In our department this division doesn't really exist. And I think there's two aspects to that which are relevant. One is what's really important for this kind of art is the idea of collaboration. Like, you can't know everything yourself, and if you look at theater, it's also very normal to have collaborative processes to make pieces. So that's also what we do in these research projects. These are images of Structet, which is a project we did once. The first time was, I think, in 2006 or 2007. And then it was at TodaysArt, and then they asked us back a year ago, 2011, to do a kind of remake of this project. And it's basically a big setup. It's in the city hall, where all the people you see are actually improvisers. They have their own electronic instruments, so you have this huge orchestra of improvised electronic music, and also a battery of people doing visuals. So that's one focus, is collaboration. The other focus is the Census. I put it in because we were talking about it yesterday with Chris. For instance, one project we did based around the Census was also a couple of years ago called Extra Census, Extra Interference, which was basically investigating the possibility to make devices which can act as extra senses. So this was one of the things which came out as a kind of radar that you can sense things which are behind you. This is a project by Nikki, who's actually in the audience, which was a project where it's a haptic interface where you can actually feel color, like you can perceive color through your haptic perception. And then if you sort of dig back further into the past, what's sort of the historical origin of our department is different. Like we now call art science. We used to be called, well, the Interfaculty was founded in 1889 by Frans Evers and Dick Rijmakers, and then was called the Interfaculty Image and Sound. And at that time they had a very strong artistic agenda to basically establish a kind of media art which is based on ideas more from music and sound, so emphasizing the time-based qualities of media art, but also the sensory, the direct sensory aspect of it. And that was rooted in research, especially Frans Evers did, into like the historical origins of this. So this, I'm showing you now an image of Alexander Wallace Remington at the end of the 19th century, who was one of the pioneers of the color organ tradition, the visual music tradition. So he built this device to play the kind of color music he had in mind. And then on the basis of that philosophy, there were a number of big projects realized in the Interfaculty which have some similarities, I think, with the Displaced project, except that they were always based on historical models and historical utopias by artists. This was the first project. It was basically, in some sense, the beginning of the Interfaculty was when, in '89, John Cage was at the conservatory for a month, and there was a big project around new media connected to that. And then after that, the next project, like the real big first Interfaculty project, was based on composition by Schoenberg, the Glückliche Hand, which was a kind of visionary music theater piece. It's one of his rare music theater pieces. And one of the visionary aspects of it is that somewhere in the score, in this part, he describes color crescendo. So he was also describing lots of instructions about lights, about set, and then the color crescendo is sort of very important moment in this piece, where he described an, in fact, impossible sequence of colors to be projected during the scene. And the idea behind this project was to work with a number of people like Dick Rijmakers, theater director Paul Cook, and a number of artists and a large group of students, to basically take this utopia apart, look at all the elements, and then recompose this and make a big music theater piece, which was the Glückliche Hand. This is an image of the set. Something similar, another project along the same lines was based on another utopia, which was, I think, also much more relevant to this place, which was the idea of Mondrian for the promenoir. Somewhere in the 20s, he also developed a vision of a new kind of art space where you would have only vertical and horizontal architectural elements, and also vertical and horizontal sounds, like he wrote about sound in composition. So the idea also behind this production, which was I think 95, was also to take apart these ideas and to make a new piece, which was in the Promenade of Mondrian. It's very badly documented, I have to be honest. I mean, I wasn't there, so you can't blame me. But it was a huge project which also included lots of food, transparent food. It was a sort of completely mechanic, multisensory theater experience. Well, this is Frans. I'm using his picture to shamelessly plug his book. It's out since, well, beginning of the summer. It's not really publicly launched yet. If you're interested, it's a book which basically, like, he was the founder of the Interfaculty. It's basically his book, his record of his research, so it gives a sort of overview of the history of synesthesia in science. There's a sort of parallel art history in it, like he mentions lots of projects and discusses them from the different fields of art. And then the third part of the book is a description of all these projects I've briefly mentioned two of. And then we go to displays. What I'm really happy about now with the collaboration with Caro is that these ideas, which had a very important role in the Interfaculty, but people go and people retire and things change, that they sort of re-enter the Interfaculty, but in a very fresh and interesting way with a lot of new angles. And in the displays projects, what I also hear from the sort of raving reaction of most of the students, is that it's also a very interesting project to also be confronted with a sort of new artistic agenda for these kind of themes. Because I think, and I want to repeat something which Angelo Vermeulen said in the first day of this symposium, is that if you think about these collaborations between art and science, it's not about this. It's not about the fact that you want to mix art and science. It's because you want to mix art and science to reach something else, because you have a larger agenda. Okay, I'm going to stop here and then give it over to Chris. Thank you.